Welcome to Elselah Books Podcast, and welcome back to the Deep Dive. This is where we take the sources you provided, the biographies, the articles, all that research, and we do the ultimate shortcut. We pull out the essential knowledge and the most surprising insights that you really need to be well-informed. Today, we're diving into the biography of Don Richardson. He was a Canadian missionary, and his work in, well, it was Irian Jaya, Indonesia, led to this really profound theoretical breakthrough in cross-cultural communication. So the core of our mission today is to unpack that theory. It's called the redemptive analogy.
And what makes this story so critical, I think, is just the extremity of the challenge.
Right.
We are analyzing a situation where the foundational moral values of a culture they were completely inverted from what he knew.
Inverted is the word.
The Sawi tribe, who are the focus of Richardson's work, they didn't just, tolerate treachery. They celebrated it. It was their highest virtue.
And that's the tension we have to follow. I mean, how do you share a message that's centered on love and trust and, ultimate sacrifice with a people who see betrayal as heroic?
And see the ultimate act of friendship as just a calculated tactic for murder.
Exactly. So this deep dive is all about understanding how deep cultural anthropology, really getting the internal narrative of a people, becomes the essential vehicle for communicating profound change.
It's precisely that. We're tracking a journey that moves from, traditional education and all that language training to a desperate, almost existential reliance on pure cultural observation.
Okay, so let's start at the beginning. Don Richardson, born in 1935 in Canada, his path toward mission started conventionally enough, right?
Right. He attended Prairie Bible School in Alberta, Canada. And the sources really highlight that while he was there, focused on his calling, he met Carol. And what really solidified their bond was this shared, really intense commitment to global mission work.
And they prepared for it rigorously. This shows they knew it wasn't some casual endeavor. Don went on to the Summer Institute of Linguistics, SIL, which is, well, it's crucial.
That's more than just a resume point. You're right. It's crucial context for later. SIL gave him the technical expertise to break down an unwritten language, to analyze its structure, and then eventually to translate foundational texts.
And at the same time, Carol was studying to become a registered nurse.
Yeah, ensuring they could bring tangible, life-saving aid right alongside their message. They married, bonded by this commitment, and then they chose a mission field known for its extreme danger, Irian Jaya.
And specifically the Sawi tribe. This is where we have to, I think, confront the dark heart of their cultural norms. Tell us about the Sawi's notorious reputation.
The Sawi were defined by calculated deceit. They weren't simply warring tribes who occasionally fought. Their entire mechanism for survival and for dominance was based on gaining trust through fake friendship.
A technique they highly valued.
But
Let's detail that tactic because the sources describe it, and it is chilling. It's really central to understanding their worldview.
The strategy was well known. They would identify neighboring tribesmen, and systematically they would befriend them. They'd offer hospitality, share food.
Invite them to these big feasts over days or weeks, all the while just building this sense of deep, genuine friendship.
And then, of course, when the visiting tribesmen were completely off their guard, believing the friendship was real, that was the moment of attack.
And it was brutal.
Precisely. They would kill their guests and, yes, consume the body. And this act of betrayal, luring an enemy to their death through false friendship, it wasn't seen as dishonorable or cowardly. It was seen as the pinnacle of wisdom, of strategic brilliance.
So a successful act of treachery actually enhanced your status within the tribe.
That's right.
The Richardsons knew this risk, but they pushed ahead. They started that essential groundwork, that slow process of integration.
Don began the long process of learning the language, working with a Sawi teacher until he was fluent. And they started to introduce practical skills, like trading their old stone axes for steel ones, which offered clear, immediate benefits.
And Carol's medical clinics, I imagine, were invaluable.
Oh, absolutely. Addressing the rampant disease and the injuries that plagued the community. So this built a fragile base of trust. But it was a trust based on utility, not moral alignment.
So after months, maybe even years of painstaking preparation, Don finally felt ready. He's ready to deliver the central story of his mission-influenced Sawi. And this is the moment where all that technical preparation from SIL just hits a cultural brick wall.
He spoke to them about creation, the fall, and eventually he got the narrative of Jesus Christ, his life, his teachings, his sacrifice, and his ultimate betrayal by one of his closest friends.
And the Sawi.
They listened politely. That was their custom.
But when he finished, the response wasn't what he expected. It wasn't acceptance or even confusion. It was It was celebration. Shocking celebration.
It was a profound cultural misunderstanding. Don was horrified to realize that the Sawi saw the story not through the lens of sacrifice and redemption, but through their own lens of valued treachery.
They didn't see Jesus as the hero.
No, they saw Judas Iscariot as the brilliant one, the hero.
They admired Judas because of his act of betrayal.
Hmm.
He successfully used false friendship to gain the upper hand. In their inverted worldview, Judas was the model of strategic wisdom.
The whole narrative was completely backward. Don realized that every single word he had translated accurately was being filtered through a cultural value system that completely negated the intended meaning.
Wow.
He was standing there, a technically flawless linguist, realizing that fluency meant nothing without a corresponding cultural reference point for goodness or sacrifice or commitment.
How do you even recover from that? That level of moral inversion must have been just utterly demoralizing.
Well, it led to a crisis of faith, certainly in their methodology, and the external situation just got worse. The sources describe the violence ramping up dramatically. The Sawi people living near them became locked in this brutal, month-long conflict with a neighboring tribe.
So the Richardsons are stuck in the middle of this. You have to imagine the constant sound of conflict, the fear, and the need to treat gruesome wounds day after day, all while knowing your central purpose has just failed spectacularly.
That experience pushed them to what the sources call the end of themselves. They realized they'd relied too heavily on their academic preparation, their skills, and not enough on finding a genuine internal solution that would resonate with Sawi morality. Months passed, zero movement toward peace, zero converts.
It sounded like they needed a shift. They had to go from being providers of services to becoming active participants in resolving the conflict. They needed leverage.
They did, and they recognized the one thing the Sawi valued enough to maybe risk their traditional way of life for.
The tangible aid, the steel tools, the medicine.
Exactly. The relative stability the Richardsons brought to the village.
So they made a high-stakes gamble. The ultimatum. What was the exact demand?
It was absolute. The two warring Sawi tribes had to stop fighting among themselves permanently, or the Richardsons would pack up everything, the medical supplies, the tools, everything, and leave.
That's really leveraging their practical utility against these deep-seated cultural norms.
And remarkably, it worked. The Sawi people agreed to stop fighting, not out of some moral conviction, but because they valued the tools and the medicine more than the continued feud.
Which led to the necessary next step.
Right. To formalize the peace and prevent future treachery, the two tribes met to engage in their most sacred, their most binding, and their most ancient practice, the peace child ceremony.
This is the turning point.
Yeah.
This is the ultimate narrative key they had been searching for. So tell us how the peace child ceremony actually worked.
This ceremony was the antithesis of everything the Sawi usually practiced. It was the absolute guarantee against any future betrayal. The leaders from the two warring groups would meet, and they would exchange their only son with one another.
Their only son. That detail is so crucial.
Absolutely. The sources emphasized this wasn't just any child. It was their firstborn, their only male heir. And they made this exchange because the commitment to not murder or betray the father of your son's new guardian, that was the only truly unbreakable bond in their entire culture.
Wow.
As long as those peace children lived, the two tribes were absolutely bound to peace and security.
I can only imagine the surge of realization Don must have felt watching this. He'd been looking for a concept of ultimate, guaranteed, binding commitment and sacrifice. And there it was, right in front of him, baked into the very structure of their society.
It was the perfect cultural vehicle. Don immediately used this ceremony as his analogy. He explained that Jesus was the ultimate peace child.
The only son.
The only son, exchanged not just to stop a single tribal war, but to stop the war between humanity and God. And as long as Jesus lives, that peace is absolutely guaranteed.
And unlike the physical peace children, who might eventually die, this guarantee was eternal. This wasn't just a clever teaching moment, was it? This was the birth of his formal mission theory.
Precisely. The redemptive analogy. The theory argues that every culture on Earth, no matter how dark or distorted its present practices might seem, has an inherent tradition or story or a concept, a pre-existing ethical framework that can serve as a bridge.
Set in place to draw them toward an ultimate truth when the time is right.
Exactly. It's about recognizing the highest value a culture already respects and leveraging it as a pathway.
That raises a critical point, though. I mean, was there ever any concern that by leveraging this sacred peace child ceremony, which was so central to their political structure, that they were maybe co-opting or manipulating a deeply sacred cultural tradition?
That's a vital, critical question. And Richardson's defense, as it's conveyed in the source material, was that the analogy didn't create a value, it corrected a distortion.
Okay, so how did he mean that?
Well, the Sawi already understood ultimate sacrifice and unbreakable commitment through the peace child mechanism. It was the one thing they honored above treachery. Richardson simply pointed out that the idea of a binding sacrificial exchange was not foreign to them. It was
Yeah.
just fulfilled in a way that offered eternal rather than temporary peace.
So the narrative bridge worked. What happened immediately after he explained the ultimate peace child?
The results were dramatic. The sources describe an unprecedented number of Sawi people converting. They immediately began the process of building a church. Don, leveraging his SIL training, was able to complete the translation of the New Testament into the Sawi language pretty quickly.
And more help came in.
Yeah, missionaries poured in, bringing more medical supplies, more tools, helping this newly unified community to thrive.
But the true measure of a transformation like this is its lasting legacy, right? The societal changes it brings. What happened in the long term?
It was a wholesale societal shift. You have to remember, this was a society plagued by constant murder, cannibalism, and high rates of disease that were made worse by the conflict. By breaking the tribal enmities and introducing modern medical care and basic tools, life expectancy just shot up.
That's a measurable, profound impact.
It is. The sources note that when Don and his son Paul returned to the tribe 50 years later, people were still alive who had been there when Don first arrived, some in their 70s.
Wow.
They had broken down centuries of conflict. Former enemies who once tried to lure each other to their deaths were now meeting in the same church, without any fear of betrayal.
That's incredible evidence of cultural reconstruction. And the impact of the redemptive analogy, it didn't just stop in Irian Jaya, it became a global mission theory.
Absolutely. One of the most famous examples the sources cite involves the Karen people in Burma.
Hmm.
Like the Sawi, they had a pre-existing narrative, a legend about a black book.
Tell us a bit more about that legend. How did it serve as a redemptive analogy?
The legend stated that the Karen people had once possessed a black book containing ultimate truth, but they had lost it. And the legend prophesied that a white man would eventually come and deliver it back to them.
So when a missionary arrived and provided the translation of the Bible, which of course was printed in black ink, the narrative was already primed for acceptance.
It provided the necessary bridge. It opened the way for massive acceptance and conversions. The redemptive analogy teaches that communication isn't just about sharing new information, it's about connecting that information to a concept that the listener's culture already respects or views as sacred, even if that concept is, fragmented or distorted.
So what does this whole deep dive mean for you, the learner, as you process this? I think the ultimate takeaway is the staggering power of deeply understanding existing cultural norms. The Richardsons had to switch their reliance entirely from their rigorous intellectual education to just acute cultural observation to find the key that unlocked everything.
They realized they weren't building something new from scratch. They were, in a way, completing a story that the culture already knew the beginning of.
And this deep dive really illustrates that effective communication requires identifying that existing ethical or narrative framework, the language a culture always respects. It's the difference between trying to force a foreign idea in and recognizing an idea that is already there, just waiting to be fully understood and applied.
It makes you wonder about our own complex, modern, often secular culture. The concept of the redemptive analogy suggests that there are shared values or stories, secular peace children, if you will, that could unlock communication on our most intractable issues.
And this raises the provocative thought we want to leave you with. What is the defining narrative or sacrifice or commitment our own culture values most highly today? Is it radical self-determination, perfect justice, or maybe a commitment to truth no matter the cost? What is the sacrifice or commitment we currently respect that could serve as a foundation to build new understanding on complex moral or societal issues?
That's a powerful framework to apply anywhere in your life, whether you're, prepping for a meeting or just reflecting on the world.
So reflect on the depth and the lasting impact of Don Richardson's work, particularly how it broke down centuries of conflict and fundamentally improved the quality of life, increasing longevity, and ensuring the end of murder for an entire people group. Try to get this book and read it. Be blessed. Thank you for listening, and do subscribe to our channel for more.